So yes, mystery religion, specifically Dionysus. Dionysus, we've talked about him quite a bit. He's showed up in our poetry, got a little bit into our story time. Alas, we've done most of this in class, but here we are. So Dionysus, Bacchus, the loud thunderer, Yuhui, Obromius. He's going to be an important figure in the history of Roman religion, especially in regard to the Christians later on. The Dionysian cult begins somewhere to the east of Rome, somewhere to the east of Greece, and it migrates westward. That's why in his origin story, Dionysus is born in Thebes, a native Greek city, but he spends time evading the wrath of Hera out east, and he acquires Eastern habits, customs, affectations, appearances, the mystical, the irrational, very stereotypical kind of associations with the East, and by East we mean in the Roman Mediterranean mind, the Near Middle East. So, it originally, we think, was an expression that happened once a month, religious expression that happened once a month, and was only for women. Women were the only participants. Masks might have been involved, sparagmos, homophagia, the drinking of wine. We have really one source in terms of the literary tradition about the Bacchanalia, and that is Livy, the Roman historian, who is very hostile to the Bacchic tradition. So his account is wild, licentious. It's full of moral depravity. And what do we mean by moral depravity? For the Roman mind, there are dangers represented by Dionysian worship. Two of them, and the two that the threats they represent are also going to be found with the Christians. One is that Dionysus is a personal god. In this way, he prefigures Depeche Mode. Experiencing Dionysian worship was intensely personal. Ecstasis, we get the word ecstasy from it. It means to stand outside of oneself, to be in the presence of a god. Dionysian worship was particular in this, in that worshippers, participants, stood outside of themselves and were in the presence of the god. He was there for them, with them, in their presence. And so, it was an intensely personal experience that dissolved all other forms of identity that a person might have, the ties that bind, gender, free status, slave, bound, barbarian, civilized, rich, poor, man, woman, old, young. Minimum age requirement on the Dionysian mysteries, 21. You had to be 21 to be inducted. So, it's going to represent a threat in that capacity because there is one identity for in a Roman mind. It's the Roman citizen, the civis Romanus. That is the most important, critical, transcendent identity, and it's partly religious, like we spoke about in the last video, but it is intensely political. And it's really the Roman male citizen that could potentially be compromised by this religious practice. Now, by 186, this practice had started to include both genders, all classes, many different age groups, and it had migrated westward to the Italian peninsula. Now, by the time it gets to Livy, he depicts it as some sort of infectious disease that somehow silently but swiftly infected the entire Italian peninsula, and this cult was everywhere. And it was an emergency, and they had to violently stamp it out, and they do. They violently suppress it, but then as the Romans are wont to do, they just absorb it and then sanitize it and make it part of their own state public religion. But the one third is that it is an intensely personal God, that it dissolves the boundaries between God and the participant, the worshipper. And so the Roman citizen identity evaporates. It's gone. That's a threat. Secondly, it brings that experience of apolitical, no notion of citizenship. It's gone. But moreover, it's done among different classes. The Romans are intensely class conscious. Intensely. And so Dionysian worship erases those divisions, takes away those boundaries. And so in these two ways, Dionysian worship is a threat to the Roman state. And it's going to be two of those things that are also going to show up in the later Christian era with our author, Pliny. So, stay tuned for that video. This is a good cutting off point. That deserves a whole other video. And it will.